Every night at exactly 6:30, Rosa Martinez pushed her cleaning cart through the back doors of Riverside Elementary School. The sound of squeaky wheels echoed through empty hallways that just hours before had been filled with the laughter and chatter of children. Now the building felt like a different world entirely. Rosa was 43 years old, though most people would guess she was younger. She had kind brown eyes and graying hair that she always kept tied back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was always clean and pressed, even though nobody really expected it to be. She took pride in the small things even when others didn't notice. For 7 long years she had been the invisible woman of Riverside Elementary. Teachers would nod politely when they saw her, but most barely remembered her name. To them, she was just part of the furniture, as permanent and unremarkable as the faded motivational posters on the classroom walls. Rosa didn't mind being invisible. Not really. She had grown used to it long ago. When she was growing up, her parents worked 3 jobs between them just to keep food on the table. There was no money for piano lessons or dance classes like the other kids had. While her classmates talked about their after-school activities, Rosa went straight home to watch her younger brothers and sisters. Her father cleaned office buildings downtown, and her mother worked in a hotel laundry room. They were good, hard-working people who taught Rosa that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of. "Keep your head down, work hard, and be grateful for what you have," her mother would say. Rosa had followed that advice her entire life. Every weekday evening, Rosa followed the same routine. She started in the main office, emptying trash cans and wiping down desks. Then she moved to the classrooms, working her way through each grade level. She knew which teachers left their rooms messy and which ones cleaned up before they left. She knew who drank too much coffee and who always forgot to turn off their computer. Mrs. Patterson in 2nd grade always left little thank you notes on her desk. Mr. Johnson, in 5th grade, sometimes worked late and would nod hello when she knocked on his door. The art teacher, Ms. Chen, often left beautiful student drawings on the walls, which Rosa would carefully dust without disturbing their placement. But it was room 108 that Rosa looked forward to every night. The music room. Room 108 was different from all the other classrooms. It smelled like old sheet music and had better lighting than the rest of the school. Along one wall stood a row of small keyboards for student practice. In the center of the room sat an old upright piano, its dark wood finish worn smooth from years of use. Rosa had no real reason to spend extra time in the music room. It was usually one of the cleanest rooms in the building. Mrs. Collins, the music teacher, was organized and rarely left much of a mess. But every night Rosa found herself moving slower in that room, taking extra care to dust the piano keys and straighten the sheet music on the stands. Sometimes, when she was sure no one else was in the building, Rosa would sit on the piano bench for just a moment. She never played, of course. She didn't know how, but she would run her fingers gently over the keys, careful not to make any sound. The keys felt cool and smooth under her fingertips, and she wondered what it would be like to make beautiful music with them. During her lunch breaks, Rosa often sat in her old Honda Civic in the school parking lot. If the weather was nice and the music room windows were open, she could sometimes hear piano lessons drifting across the playground. Children's voices would rise and fall as they practiced scales or simple songs. Rosa would close her eyes and listen, imagining what it would feel like to create those sounds herself. At home, Rosa lived in a small apartment with her teenage daughter, Carmen. Carmen was smart and hardworking, just like Rosa had been at that age. She was in her junior year of high school and had dreams of becoming a nurse. Rosa worked hard to make sure Carmen could focus on her studies and wouldn't have to worry about money the way Rosa had. When she was young, Carmen often found her mother sitting at their small kitchen table late at night, reading library books about music theory or famous composers. "Why do you read those books, Mom?" Carmen would ask. Rosa would just smile and say she found them interesting. What Rosa never told Carmen was that she had been teaching herself about music for over 20 years. She had checked out every music book the public library had, some of them multiple times. She knew about major and minor scales, about time signatures and key changes. She had memorized the life stories of Mozart and Beethoven and Bach. She could read sheet music almost as easily as she could read English. 3 years ago, Rosa had saved up enough money to buy a small electronic keyboard from a pawn shop. It wasn't much, just a basic model with weighted keys, but to Rosa it was treasure. She kept it in her bedroom closet and only took it out late at night when Carmen was asleep. Rosa had taught herself to play using online videos and library books. Her fingers had grown strong and sure over hundreds of quiet practice sessions. She knew dozens of classical pieces by heart, though she had never played them for another living soul. Chopin, Debussy, Bach, Mozart. Their music lived in her fingers and in her heart. But Rosa never dreamed of being anything other than what she was. That wasn't how her world worked. People like her didn't become musicians or performers. They worked steady jobs, raised their children, and found their joy in small private moments. Every morning when Rosa finished her shift at 7 o'clock, she would take one last look at the piano in room 108. She would imagine, just for a second, what it would sound like to play a real piano instead of her little keyboard. Then she would push her cart to the supply closet, hang up her uniform, and drive home to get some sleep before Carmen woke up for school. Rosa Martinez was invisible, unremarkable, and completely ordinary. At least that's what everyone thought. Even Rosa herself believed it most days. She had no idea that everything was about to change, and that her carefully quiet life was about to be turned completely upside down. The piano in room 108 sat waiting, as if it somehow knew that its time with Rosa was coming very soon. Thursday evening started like any other for Rosa Martinez. She had just finished cleaning the third-grade hallway when she heard voices coming from the music room. This was unusual. By 7 o'clock, the building was normally empty except for her and maybe one teacher working late. Rosa pushed her cart closer to room 108 and peeked inside. The room was buzzing with activity. About 30 children sat in folding chairs arranged in neat rows, all wearing their best clothes. Some held handmade props, others clutched sheets of paper with song lyrics written in colorful markers. At the front of the room stood Mrs. Collins, the music teacher, holding her cell phone to her ear with a worried expression on her face. This was the final rehearsal for the annual spring talent show, Rosa realized. She had seen the bright posters hanging in the hallways for weeks, advertising the event scheduled for Friday evening. Parents would fill the gymnasium to watch their children sing, dance, and perform for the whole school community. No, I understand you're sick, but what am I supposed to do? Mrs. Collins was saying into her phone, her voice tight with stress. The show is tomorrow night. These children have been practicing for months. Rosa had never seen Mrs. Collins look so flustered. Usually the music teacher was calm and organized, floating through her lessons with an easy smile. Tonight her brown hair was falling out of its usually neat bun, and she kept pushing her glasses up her nose with shaking fingers. Please, isn't there anyone else who can fill in? Mrs. Collins continued, pacing back and forth in front of the piano. Any of your other students? Anyone at all? The children were starting to fidget in their chairs. A little girl in a sparkly dress raised her hand. Mrs. Collins, are we still going to practice our song? Just give me one more minute, honey, Mrs. Collins replied. But Rosa could hear the panic creeping into her voice. Rosa stayed by the doorway, not wanting to interrupt but unsure whether she should continue with her cleaning. She had always liked Mrs. Collins. The music teacher was one of the few staff members who consistently acknowledged Rosa's presence, always saying good evening when their paths crossed. Fine, I understand, Mrs. Collins said into the phone. Feel better. She hung up and stared at the device in her hand as if it might magically solve her problems. Mrs. Collins, what's wrong? Asked a boy in the front row wearing a small bow tie. Mrs. Collins took a deep breath and forced a smile. Well, children, it seems our piano player, Mr. Rodriguez, is very sick with the flu. He won't be able to play for us tomorrow night. A wave of disappointed murmurs rippled through the room. The little girl in the sparkly dress looked like she might cry. But we practiced so hard, said another child. I know, Mrs. Collins said, running her hands through her hair. Let me think for a minute. Rosa watched as Mrs. Collins frantically scrolled through her phone contacts, probably looking for anyone who might be able to play piano on such short notice. Rosa knew from her years of observing school events that finding a substitute pianist for tomorrow evening would be nearly impossible. Mrs. Collins made 3 more phone calls, each one ending in disappointment. The children grew more restless with each failed attempt. Some of them had started whispering among themselves, and Rosa could see the excitement draining from their faces. Maybe we could just sing without the piano, suggested a brave 4th grader. Mrs. Collins shook her head. Some of your songs really need the musical support, sweetie, and the timing will be all wrong without the accompaniment. Rosa felt her heart breaking for these children. She had watched them practice through the music room windows during her lunch breaks. They had worked so hard, memorizing their parts and helping each other with difficult dance moves. The talent show was clearly the highlight of their school year. Mrs. Collins sank into a chair and buried her face in her hands. "I don't know what we're going to do," she said quietly. That's when she looked up and noticed Rosa standing in the doorway with her cleaning cart. "Rosa," Mrs. Collins said, her voice suddenly brightening with desperate hope. Perfect timing. Rosa felt her stomach flutter with nervousness. She had been hoping to slip away unnoticed, but now all 30 pairs of young eyes were focused on her. "Mrs. Collins," Rosa said softly, "I can come back later if you need the room." No, actually, you might be able to help us," Mrs. Collins said, standing up and walking toward Rosa with quick, determined steps. "We're in a real emergency here." Rosa felt her cheeks grow warm. She was used to being invisible, not the center of attention in a room full of people. Mrs. Collins gestured toward the piano. "Mr. Rodriguez can't make it tomorrow night, and I can't find anyone else to play piano for the children's performances. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you possibly help us out?" Rosa's eyes widened in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Could you play the piano for us tomorrow night? Just simple accompaniment, nothing fancy. Most of these songs just need basic chords and rhythm." Rosa felt the blood drain from her face. Her heart started beating so fast she was sure everyone could hear it. "Mrs. Collins, I can't play piano." Mrs. Collins waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm sure you can manage something. These children have worked so hard and we can't disappoint their families tomorrow night." "But I really can't," Rosa protested weakly. "I've never played piano before." Mrs. Collins wasn't listening. The desperation of the situation had taken over her usual rational thinking. "Look, you don't need to be a concert pianist. Just sit at the bench and hit some keys to keep rhythm. The children know their songs well enough that they can carry the melody themselves." Rosa felt trapped. The children were all looking at her with hopeful expressions, and Mrs. Collins clearly wasn't going to take no for an answer. "Even if you just play simple chords, it would be better than nothing," Mrs. Collins continued. "These kids deserve to have their moment to shine." Rosa looked around the room at all the eager young faces. She thought about how disappointed they would be if their talent show was canceled. She thought about their parents who had probably already arranged time off work to come watch their children perform. "Mrs. Collins," Rosa tried one more time, "I really don't think I can help you." But Mrs. Collins had already made up her mind. "Nonsense. Anyone can bang out a simple tune. Just sit down at the piano and give it a try. We need to run through the timing at least once before tomorrow night." Rosa felt her palms growing sweaty. She had dreamed of playing the piano in room 108 for years, but never like this. Never with an audience of children staring at her, expecting her to fail. Mrs. Collins was already walking back toward the piano bench, clearly expecting Rosa to follow. "Come on," Mrs. Collins said with forced cheerfulness. "What's the worst that could happen?" Rosa's hands were shaking as she slowly walked toward the piano. Each step felt like it took forever, and she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. 30 children watched her every move, their faces full of hope and curiosity. Mrs. Collins stood beside the piano bench with an encouraging smile that didn't quite hide her own nervousness. "Just take your time," Mrs. Collins said gently. "Remember, we're not expecting perfection. Anything you can manage will be wonderful." Rosa reached the piano bench and stared down at it as if it might bite her. This was the same bench she had sat on countless times during her late-night cleaning shifts, always careful never to make a sound. Now she was expected to sit here and play in front of all these people. Her mind raced with panic. What if she froze up completely? What if her fingers forgot everything she had taught herself over the past 20 years? What if she disappointed these children who were counting on her? "It's okay, Rosa," called out the little girl in the sparkly dress. "We believe in you." The kindness in the child's voice made Rosa's eyes fill with tears. She thought about her own daughter Carmen at that age, full of dreams and excitement about the world. These children deserved to have their special night tomorrow. Rosa slowly sat down on the bench. The familiar feel of it beneath her brought back memories of all those quiet nights when she had imagined what it would be like to really play this piano. She had dreamed of this moment but never imagined it would happen like this. She looked at the keys stretching out in front of her. They looked exactly the same as they always had, black and white in their perfect pattern. But now they seemed to be waiting for her, almost calling to her. Maybe just start with something simple, Mrs. Collins suggested. Do you know any basic songs? Maybe Mary Had a Little Lamb or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Rosa nodded weakly, though her throat felt too tight to speak. She raised her hands toward the keys, then stopped. Her fingers were trembling so badly she could barely control them. Take a deep breath, Mrs. Collins said softly. There's no pressure here. Just do whatever feels natural. Rosa closed her eyes and tried to calm herself. She thought about all those late nights in her bedroom, playing her little keyboard while Carmen slept. She remembered the feeling of peace that came over her when she played, the way the music seemed to flow through her like water. She opened her eyes and looked at the keys again. Slowly, carefully, she placed her hands in position. Her right hand found middle C, just like she had practiced thousands of times. Her left hand settled into place for the bass notes. For a moment, she just sat there, feeling the cool smoothness of the keys beneath her fingertips. Then, almost without thinking, she began to play. The first notes were soft and tentative, just a simple melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. But as her fingers found their rhythm, something magical began to happen. 20 years of secret practice took over, and Rosa's hands began to move with a confidence that surprised even her. The simple melody grew richer and more complex. Her left hand added bass notes that gave depth and warmth to the music. Her right hand began to weave in delicate decorations that made the tune dance and sparkle. Within moments, Rosa was no longer playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Her fingers had found their way to a piece she had been practicing for months on her keyboard at home. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of the most beautiful and challenging pieces in the classical piano repertoire. The room filled with music unlike anything that had ever been heard within its walls. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys with the skill and precision of a concert pianist. Every note was perfectly placed, every phrase shaped with artistic sensitivity that spoke of years of dedicated study. The children sat in complete silence, their mouths hanging open in amazement. Even the most restless students were frozen in their chairs, captivated by the incredible sounds coming from their school janitor. Mrs. Collins stumbled backward until she hit the wall, her hand pressed to her chest in shock. This was not what she had expected when she asked Rosa to bang out a simple tune. This was professional-level playing that belonged on a concert stage, not in an elementary school music room. Rosa's eyes were closed now, lost in the music that flowed from her heart through her fingers. This was the piece she had always dreamed of playing on a real piano. Her little keyboard at home could never capture the full richness and power of these sounds. The melody soared and dipped, telling a story without words. Rosa's face had completely transformed. Gone was the nervous, frightened expression. In its place was the serene focus of a true musician, someone who had found their deepest calling. As the piece reached its climactic moments, Rosa's hands moved with increasing complexity and speed. Her fingers seemed to dance across the keys, creating cascades of notes that filled every corner of the room. The children watched in wonder as this quiet woman they barely knew revealed herself to be something extraordinary. The final phrase of the nocturne was soft and gentle, like a whispered goodnight. Rosa played the last notes with exquisite tenderness, letting each one fade naturally into silence. When the music ended, she kept her hands on the keys for a moment, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The room was completely quiet. Not a single child moved or made a sound. Mrs. Collins stood against the wall with tears running down her cheeks. Rosa slowly opened her eyes and looked around the room. The reality of what she had just done hit her like a physical blow. She had exposed her deepest secret, the part of herself she had kept hidden for decades. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, pulling her hands away from the keys as if they were on fire. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. But before she could finish her sentence, the room exploded with sound. All 30 children burst into applause, their young voices calling out in amazement and delight. "That was incredible," shouted the boy in the bow tie. "You're like a real professional," called the little girl in the sparkly dress. "Mrs. Collins, did you know Rosa could play like that?" asked another child. Mrs. Collins was walking toward the piano with tears still streaming down her face. Rosa, she said, her voice full of wonder. Where did you learn to play like that? Rosa felt her own tears starting to fall. I taught myself, she said quietly. I've been practicing at home for a long time. A long time? Mrs. Collins repeated. Rosa, what you just played? That's one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. That's not something you learn in a few months. Rosa looked down at her hand, still not quite believing what had just happened. 20 years, she admitted. I've been studying music for 20 years. The room fell silent again as everyone tried to process this information. The woman they had seen as just a janitor had been hiding a talent that most people spend lifetimes trying to develop. Mrs. Collins walked over to Rosa and gently placed her hand on her shoulder. The children were still buzzing with excitement, chattering among themselves about the amazing performance they had just witnessed. Rosa, I owe you a huge apology, Mrs. Collins said, her voice thick with emotion. I had no idea. The way I spoke to you earlier, telling you to just bang on the keys. She shook her head in embarrassment. That was incredibly insensitive of me. Rosa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Collins. You were just trying to help the children. But I made assumptions about you, Mrs. Collins continued. I've worked in this building alongside you for years, and I never took the time to really know you. That was wrong of me. The little girl in the sparkly dress raised her hand. Mrs. Collins, does this mean Rosa can play for our talent show tomorrow? Mrs. Collins looked at Rosa with hopeful eyes. Would you be willing? I mean, only if you want to. After what you just played, I think you could accompany anything. Rosa felt overwhelmed. Part of her wanted to run home and pretend this had never happened. But looking at all these excited young faces, she found herself nodding. If you think I can help, I'd be happy to try. The room erupted in cheers again. Mrs. Collins clapped her hands together to get everyone's attention. All right, children, let's run through your songs with Rosa. But first, I think we all need to know more about our mysterious pianist. Rosa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as 30 pairs of curious eyes focused on her again. She had spent so many years being invisible that all this attention felt strange and uncomfortable. How did you learn to play like that? Asked the boy in the bow tie. Rosa took a deep breath. Well, I've always loved music. When I was young, my family couldn't afford piano lessons, so I started reading books about music from the library. Then I bought a small keyboard and taught myself to play. For 20 years? Mrs. Collins asked in amazement. Yes, Rosa said quietly. I practice every night after work when my daughter is asleep. Mrs. Collins shook her head in wonder. Rosa, what you just played? That's conservatory-level skill. You could be performing professionally. Rosa laughed nervously. Oh no, I'm not that good. I just play for myself, but Mrs. Collins wasn't convinced. After they ran through all the children's songs for the talent show, she asked Rosa to stay behind for a few minutes. Rosa, I have to ask, Mrs. Collins said when they were alone. Have you ever thought about pursuing music seriously? Teaching lessons, maybe? Or performing? Rosa gathered her cleaning supplies and shook her head. Mrs. Collins, I'm just a janitor. I have a daughter to support and bills to pay. Playing piano is just something I do for fun. But you have such an incredible gift, Mrs. Collins protested. It seems like a waste to keep it hidden. Rosa smiled sadly. Some dreams are just dreams, Mrs. Collins. Not everyone gets to be a professional musician. But Mrs. Collins couldn't stop thinking about what she had witnessed. The next morning, she arrived at school early and went straight to the principal's office. Principal Johnson was a kind man in his 50s who had been running Riverside Elementary for over a decade. He looked up from his paperwork when Mrs. Collins knocked on his door. Good morning, Linda. You're here early today. Mrs. Collins sat down across from his desk. David, you're not going to believe what happened last night during talent show rehearsal. She told him the whole story, from Mr. Rodriguez calling in sick to Rosa's incredible performance. Principal Johnson listened with growing amazement. You're telling me that Rosa, our night janitor, played a Chopin nocturne perfectly? He asked. More than perfectly, Mrs. Collins said. It was absolutely breathtaking. David, this woman has been hiding an extraordinary talent for years. Principal Johnson leaned back in his chair. Well, I'll be damned. I've said hello to Rosa probably 1,000 times over the years, but I had no idea. That's just it, Mrs. Collins said. How many other people are walking around with incredible talents that we never notice because we make assumptions about them? By lunchtime that day, word had spread through the entire school. Teachers who had barely acknowledged Rosa for years were suddenly seeing her with completely different eyes. The art teacher, Ms. Chen, made a point of finding Rosa during her lunch break. "Rosa, I heard about last night," Ms. Chen said. "Mrs. Collins told me you played beautifully. I wanted to apologize for never really getting to know you better." Rosa was touched by the gesture but also felt uncomfortable with all the sudden attention. She had spent so many years being invisible that being noticed felt overwhelming. During the talent show that Friday evening, Rosa sat at the piano wearing her best dress, a simple black outfit she had bought years ago for Carmen's school graduation. The gymnasium was packed with parents, grandparents, and siblings, all there to support their young performers. When Rosa began playing the first song, a hush fell over the audience. Her accompaniment was flawless, supporting the children's voices while adding her own artistic touches that elevated every performance. After the show, parents approached her with amazement and gratitude. One mother shook her hand and said, "That was the most beautiful piano playing I've ever heard at a school event." "Are you a professional musician?" Rosa smiled and shook her head. "No, I'm just the janitor here." But Principal Johnson, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. "Actually, Rosa is much more than just a janitor. She's a remarkably talented musician who has been part of our school family for 7 years." Word about Rosa's talent spread beyond the school walls. A local newspaper reporter heard about the story and came to interview her. The article, titled "Hidden Talent Discovered at Local Elementary School," ran on the front page of the community section. The story caught the attention of Dr. Patricia Vega, a piano instructor at the nearby community college. She called the school and asked to speak with Rosa. "Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Vega said when they met, "I read the article about you in the paper. I was wondering if you would consider auditioning for our adult continuing education music program." Rosa was stunned. "I don't think I'm qualified for something like that." "From what I've heard, you're more than qualified," Dr. Vega replied. "We have scholarships available for talented students who want to pursue formal music education." That weekend, Rosa sat at her kitchen table with Carmen, who was home from school. Carmen had heard about everything that had happened and was bursting with pride for her mother. "Mom, you've been keeping this huge secret from me," Carmen said with a smile. "I always wondered why you had that keyboard in your room." Rosa reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "I never wanted you to think I was wasting time on silly dreams when I should have been focusing on practical things." Carmen squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, following your dreams isn't silly. It's inspiring. You've worked so hard for so many years, both at your job and with your music. Maybe it's time to see where your talent can take you." Rosa felt tears in her eyes. Her quiet, invisible life had been turned completely upside down in just 1 week. People who had never really seen her before were suddenly treating her like someone special. For the first time in her adult life, Rosa began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could be more than she had always believed possible. 6 months later, Rosa Martinez sat at the same piano in room 108. But everything else had changed. The morning sun streamed through the windows as she played a gentle warm-up piece before her first piano lesson of the day. Her fingers moved with even more confidence now, strengthened by months of formal training with Dr. Vega at the community college. The door opened, and 8-year-old Tommy walked in carrying his small backpack. He was one of Rosa's first students, a shy boy whose family couldn't afford traditional music lessons. His face lit up when he saw her at the piano. "Good morning, Mrs. Rosa," he said, setting his backpack down carefully. "Can we work on that song from last week? I practiced every day just like you taught me." Rosa smiled warmly. "Of course, Tommy. Show me what you remember." Teaching had come naturally to Rosa, though it had taken her months to believe she was qualified to do it. Dr. Vega had been amazed by Rosa's musical knowledge during their first meeting. Not only could Rosa play beautifully, but she understood music theory better than many college graduates. "You have perfect pitch," Dr. Vega had told her after Rosa's informal audition. "Do you realize how rare that is? And your sight reading skills are incredible. Where did you say you studied?" Rosa had laughed nervously. "I didn't study anywhere official. Just books from the library and practice at home." Dr. Vega had shaken her head in amazement. "Rosa, you've given yourself the equivalent of a conservatory education. What you need now is formal recognition of what you already know." The scholarship Dr. Vega offered covered Rosa's tuition for the adult continuing education program. Rosa had been terrified on her first day of class, surrounded by other adult students who seemed so much more confident than she felt. But her fears quickly disappeared when she realized that her years of self-study had prepared her well. In fact, she often understood concepts faster than her classmates and could play pieces that challenged even the more advanced students. Principal Johnson had been incredibly supportive of Rosa's new path. Instead of losing their night janitor, the school had gained something much more valuable. Rosa now worked part-time cleaning and part-time as a music aide, helping Mrs. Collins with classes and giving individual lessons to students who needed extra support. "It's the best decision I've ever made as a principal," Principal Johnson had told the local newspaper when they did a follow-up story 6 months later. "Rosa has brought so much joy and talent to our school community. The children absolutely love her." The piano lesson program Rosa started had grown beyond anyone's expectations. It began with just a few students whose families couldn't afford private lessons, but word spread quickly through the community. Soon Rosa had a waiting list of children eager to learn from the woman they called the piano lady. What made Rosa special as a teacher wasn't just her musical skill, it was her understanding of what it felt like to have dreams that seemed impossible. She saw herself in every child who doubted their abilities or felt like music was something only for other people. "Music belongs to everyone," she would tell her students. "It doesn't matter where you come from or how much money your family has. If you have passion and you're willing to work hard, you can create something beautiful." Tommy finished playing his piece and Rosa clapped enthusiastically. "That was wonderful. You've been practicing, haven't you?" Tommy beamed with pride. "My mom says I sound much better than when I started. She wants to know if you can teach my little sister too when she gets older." "I'd be happy to," Rosa said. "But first, let's work on your left-hand technique. I have some exercises that will help you." As Tommy worked through his scales, Rosa reflected on how much her life had changed. The scared woman who had been terrified to touch the piano keys in front of people had become someone who performed regularly at school events and community gatherings. Just last month, she had played a solo piece at the annual fundraising dinner for the school district. Standing ovation after standing ovation had greeted her performance. But what meant the most to Rosa were the tears of joy she saw in the audience, parents and community members who had been moved by her music. Carmen, now in her senior year of high school, had become Rosa's biggest supporter and promoter. She bragged to her friends about her famous mom and often came to watch Rosa's evening lessons. "Mom, you should see how those kids look at you," Carmen had said recently. "You're like their hero. You're showing them that dreams really can come true, no matter how impossible they seem." Dr. Vega had even suggested that Rosa consider applying to a 4-year music education program after finishing her community college courses. "You have a gift not just for playing, but for teaching," Dr. Vega had said. "You could help so many more children if you had a teaching degree." The idea still seemed overwhelming to Rosa sometimes. At 44, she was starting a completely new chapter of her life. But every time she sat at the piano and saw the wonder in a child's eyes when they played their first complete song, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. After Tommy's lesson ended, Rosa had a few minutes before her next student arrived. She sat at the piano and began playing softly, letting her fingers wander through a piece she was learning for her college classes, a Bach invention that challenged her in new ways. Mrs. Collins peeked into the room. "Rosa, there's someone here to see you." A woman Rosa didn't recognize stood in the doorway, holding the hand of a small girl who looked to be about 6 years old. "Mrs. Martinez?" The woman said. "My name is Lisa Huang. I read about you in the newspaper, and I was hoping you might have room for one more student." Rosa looked at the little girl, who was staring at the piano with the same wonder Rosa remembered feeling at that age. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Anna," the girl whispered shyly. "And do you want to learn to play piano, Anna?" The little girl nodded eagerly, her eyes never leaving the keys. Rosa's heart melted. She saw herself in this child, the same longing, the same mixture of hope and fear that maybe music was meant for other people, not for her. "Well, Anna," Rosa said gently, "would you like to try playing something right now?" Anna's face lit up with pure joy as Rosa helped her up onto the piano bench. As the little girl pressed her first tentative keys, Rosa remembered that scared janitor who had been pushed to play piano in front of 30 children just 6 months ago. That woman had been convinced she was ordinary, unremarkable, invisible. She had believed that people like her didn't get to live their dreams or share their gifts with the world. But that woman had been wrong. Rosa Martinez was proof that extraordinary talent and passion can be found anywhere, in janitors and factory workers, in grocery clerks and bus drivers, in all the people who go through life thinking they're nothing special. As Anna played her first simple melody, Rosa smiled and thought about all the other hidden talents walking through the world, waiting for their moment to shine. Maybe they just needed someone to believe in them, the way Mrs. Collins had unknowingly believed in Rosa that desperate Thursday evening. And maybe, just maybe, Rosa could help some of those hidden dreams come to light, one piano lesson at a time.